at your door and delivers $5 billion and invites you to please take over, sign here this paper, and afterwards you're going to own 10 amazing mansions all over the world at different places, and he gives you a catalog of people that are going to be your servants and your drivers and stuff like this. You can imagine that, but you will not think this is going to happen. So with with this kind of afflictive projections, you're creating. It's the same power of the mind to imagine things. You imagine something, but you're not aware that you're imagining something, and instead you take that as being the reality. You create a parallel universe. I mean, definitely when you daydream and you think that somebody's going to knock at your door and going to deliver several billions of dollars and invite you to several mansions all over the place and blah, 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 that's an illusion. That's not going to happen. Normally this doesn't happen. I guess it never happened and probably might never happen in the future as well. So it's really definitely clearly just illusion. But what the afflictions are doing, they're doing something exactly similar. They're projecting something on objects, on people, on situations, and so forth. But the afflictions are not aware that they are projecting. And so they're creating an appearance, and then they believe that appearance. So they believe the appearance such that they are thinking that what they created here is the reality. In other words, the projection or the affliction, the attachment, the hatred, and so forth, is creating a parallel universe. No problem. But it believes that. It believes that creation to be the reality. And insofar, you're out of touch with reality. And if you try, according to your deepest wish, to be happy and not to suffer, while you're out of touch with reality, you just don't have a good start. It's not going to happen. Yeah, we need to base ourselves in reality. So if we, I mean, very often people use the example of a car. If we buy a shiny new or almost new car, it appears so pretty. It appears so satisfying. It seems to have only good sides. It's going to be very empowering. We're going to do so many things, and it's just such a wonderful thing to look at. It's going to be only satisfying. That's a complete illusion. That's not going to happen. You're going to pay tax for this car. You're going to have to put fuel in this car. This car is very dirty. It has fumes coming out of the back. There's explosions going on inside of this car. Whatever the color is, however shiny it is, you're going to have to repair this car. You're going to have to park this car somewhere. Somebody might scratch this car. Then what? And so forth. But it doesn't appear like that. It doesn't appear as something that is very much in change. It has many kind of conditions. It is functioning in a certain way. There could be, for example, the appearance, this car is powerful. As if it is simply that. It's just powerful. It is not related to the idea. There's an appearance of it being powerful without thinking about that there's explosions going on in this car. That's why it's powerful. It seems to be simply, purely, stainlessly powerful. So the reality is not like that. This thing is dirty and it has all these problems that I have already listed. I don't need to list them again. So there's going to be a lot of problems coming, a lot of work coming from it. It's going to be a problem many times and so forth. But this is not how it appears. This is not how it appears when you see it in the auto, in the car, how you call this, space, yeah, where all these cars are standing there. There seem to be something like just to pick up, bring home, and they're going to make you happy. There's no appearance when you are in this presentation room of this is going to cost me tax. I'm going to have to put a lot of fuel in that. This car will be something that breaks down and needs to be repaired. It does not appear like that. Check it out. Check it out in your own experience when you see this kind of stuff. So this is exactly where the reality has nothing to do with how it appears to you. And how it appears to you is because your mind is creating this appearance. So what you're actually encountering there is your appearance making, is your projection, is your parallel universe. A car that is only shiny is powerful in and out of itself, miraculously, without explosions or dirt or fumes or something like this, is simply a powerful thing in and out of itself, does not exist at all in the slightest. There's no such thing. It's completely hallucinated. Reality is not like that. But what your attachment is going for is that appearance. Very few people buy a car with the clear recognition that they're going to have to repair that, or that they have to park it somewhere, or that they have to pay taxes for that, or that it is very dirty. That is something that is producing fumes and has explosions inside and stuff like that. Advertising knows very well about all this stuff. Advertising is playing on many things. What you are paying in the end is definitely not what this car is worth. A car that brings you from A to B is not worth that price. Definitely not. It's definitely not worth this price. You are paying for the whole illusion. So advertising knows very much about our capacity to produce illusions. And they are aiding us in this a lot with the lighting of the car, how it is presented. Like if you watch a video, how a new kind of car is presented at at a car show. It's like a God landing or something. It's kind of amazing. The light show, what's displayed in the back. There might be a super huge screen showing all kind of amazing landscape. And this thing comes in. This thing that is simply heavy is out of cold metal, has explosions inside, and is full of dirt. It doesn't appear at all like that. And of course, they're not interested for it to appear like that, because otherwise you don't pay this price, which is nothing to do from you being brought from A to B. And maybe you don't want just to be brought from A to B. You want to buy something more than just being brought from A to B. You want to buy into this whole thing of a status symbol. The whole thing of that you can express something about where you are in life, how successful you were, and so forth. So you use the object for a whole bubble of things. And you're willing to pay for that a lot. So anyway, I'm saying this kind of stuff in order to encourage you to check out in your daily life how things appear. And maybe just that, yeah. I indeed do this sometimes. I look at objects and I simply state to myself what I'm seeing or like what I'm experiencing. Yeah? You need to get so much in touch with yourself that you can verbalize what's going on with you right now. No judging, just observing, just finding out, how does it appear? How do I feel? For example, when I encounter this object, do I feel light and open and generous and wanting to help somebody? Or do I feel heavy? I feel like I have an encounter. I want to own that. What's going on in my mind when I encounter this object? How do I react? But more than that, how does it appear? Because when you're clear about how it appears, when you have that clear, in a second step, you can then ask yourself, but does it exist in this way? Is it really so shiny? Is it really so glorious? Is it really so powerful? Is it so clean? There's a strong thing in Buddhism, a strong thing that the Buddha is talking about how the unclean appears as clean. And I found over the years, this is a very powerful statement. Yeah, check out how many things in your daily life are appearing as being clean, glorious, shining. radiating purity. And then you check afterwards, once you have clarified to yourself how this appears, how you experience that, then you lean back. And now you check what's the relation between the reality and your appearance. Yeah. So this is with regard to things that are on the attachment side. And the same thing you can do with things that are kind of disgusting, or that are like things that you simply reject, like objects of hatred, or and so forth. Or like you mentioned something, Anka, about frustration. Beautiful. Frustration is a beautiful thing, like a beautiful example for what's going on here. So in frustration, we would go for a certain task. We would do a certain thing. We tried, maybe we want to explain something, clarify something, or we want to, maybe I can take a personal example. One time, so I don't know if everybody knows it, but here in Atlanta, I'm acting as the translator for one of the programs. And so I need to prepare text for the session, so that I know already what's going on. I've understood the Tibetan vocabulary, the grammar, and so forth. So I said to myself, okay, I have until the next teaching, I have kind of 3 days. In these 3 days, I have to prepare, let's say, 20 pages, or let's say 18 pages. So that means every day 6 pages. So now I'm going to sit down on the first session of preparation. I'm going to do, out of the daily 6 pages, I'm going to do 3. So this is this page, this page, this page. Now I sit down and I prepare this thing and I do 3 pages. And then I start to prepare that, and I find the Tibetan is incredibly convoluted. I encounter a piece of text where I don't know many technical terms. I check it against an English translation. I don't see how this goes together. I find faults with the translation that I have in front of myself. Everything is very, very is not flowing, is not going easy. I look it up in dictionaries and I don't find it. The suggestions in dictionaries are not what fits into the context and so forth. And I'm slowed down like crazy. And after half an hour, I have done only half a page. I mean, this is from the past when I started translating. There were situations like that. And I was desperate. I said, no, listen, I was set on doing 3 pages. And now I have only 1. And I was very frustrated, and I was having all kind of doubts about me being able to do this job and stuff like this. And in reality, what happened? Let's just look at this again. I said I have to prepare 18 pages. This is going to be in 3 days, so it's 6 pages every day. I'm going to do 2 sessions. In the first session, I have to do 3 pages of this day, 6 pages. That's completely abstract. It does not take into account that certain parts of the text are more difficult than other parts of the text. It's a complete abstraction, dividing by numbers. How could I expect that these pages that turned out to be difficult will simply be done by numbers? I will end up with 3 pages. Yeah, later on it might be easier, let's go quicker, and in the end I will have the 6 pages and stuff like this. But the frustration came in my example here by having an abstraction about reality, that all these 18 pages are exactly the same, and they have the same level of difficulty and so forth. The reality didn't care about that. The reality didn't care about me making a nice counting of 20 pages or 80 pages and dividing it into 3 and so forth. The reality didn't care. It was simply difficult. It was not possible to do these 3 pages in that amount of time. So that's the thing. If we are ending up frustrated, I guess we can really say what this means is that we had an expectation that had nothing to do with reality. We were expecting something that was, again, a projection. We did not understand what we were dealing with. And then reality didn't give a damn about our projections, and it was just reality. And so we had a clash about our expectations that we built up in our head. Nobody forced us to build up these expectations. Nobody, especially not the text in this case. But the reality was different. So we build up these expectations, the reality is different, it doesn't match, we get frustrated. Frustration is a blockage. You're tired, you're down. If somebody wants something from you, you might be angry. You're in a horrible state. You're definitely suffering. And you're not living up to your wish of wanting to be happy and not to suffer. Quite the opposite. And this has a lot to do with that you're projecting a reality that has, or a fake reality that has nothing to do with what actually is going on. So now we have talked a little bit about an attachment object. We have talked about frustration. We could do the same thing with regard to anger. You can do the same thing with regard to pride. Pride is a mind that takes a certain kind of good quality that you have, let's say you're strong, and then makes a big thing out of that. This strength of yours will disappear naturally by your aging. Naturally. And you just need to catch a cold, and this strength will not mean anything. But one builds up an incredible self-perception out of this one feature. So what? So again, it is a creative act in the mind. It creates realities about yourself and so forth. And then other people are not willing to buy into this. They're not willing to praise you for this little bit of strength that you have or how you portray yourself, and they make fun of you. And then you're frustrated and you're angry and the whole thing. Well, don't project something like this in the first place. Yeah? So I could really kind of in general say that Buddhism is about popping the balloon, understanding how much projection is going on, how much we are living in a parallel universe. As soon as there's infliction, parallel universes are created. That will not go down well with our project of wanting to be happy and not to suffer and to want to be free. It's kind of we are putting ourselves in our own prison of these projections by the afflictions. So why am I talking about this affliction since 2-3 sessions? I wanted to point out this power of the mind to generate projections. I wanted to point out how we are projecting something. We are not aware that we are projecting. The projection appears to be the actual reality, and we believe that. And then we act on the basis of that projection. The reality doesn't give a damn what we are projecting. The reality is just a reality, and it's going to function in that way. And we are set up for all kind of frustration, problems, dissatisfaction, pain, and so forth. So I wanted to point out this process of projecting and generating kind of parallel universes and believing them and so forth, because the actual true origin, what we were talking about, yeah, I hope everybody remembers this, that we were talking about the Four Noble Truths, that is the true sufferings coming from true origins, karma, and afflictions, and these come from the actual root, which is the ignorance grasping for true existence. And due to this, there's all this samsara. So the very root, this ignorance grasping for true existence, is doing exactly the same. It is also projecting a reality. It is creating a parallel universe that has nothing to do with what is actually going on. And it is not aware of this projection. And it is grasping for that as being actually there. It believes its own projection. On the basis of that kind of projection, all the other projections are happening. All the attachment, all the jealousy, all the anger, all the pride, and so forth. All of that is happening on the basis of that. Yeah. So just to point out what we're actually talking about when we talk about this ignorance, that is the root of samsara. Like when we talk about the 12 links, the first link of ignorance is such an ignorance. So that, as I said before, ignorance is not just a factor of not knowing what is the reality. It's not just being ignorant about something. Ignorance is actually a mind that is not just not understanding reality, but is projecting something else and believes that. So ignorance is not talking about like a good quality of a certain car or whatever, and then exaggerates that, or feels like this is an object that has only good qualities, or this object is a pure object or something. It's not just doing that. It is projecting on a completely different level of existence, and that is that ignorance, the ignorance that we are talking about here, in this context, which is the root of samsara, this ignorance has a misunderstanding about how things actually exist on the final level. So it does not understand how things exist, and instead it projects a way of existence on all things that is impossible. So I used these technical terms before. This is expressed as that this ignorance is projecting on the world that things are inherently existent by their own nature, from their own side, that they are existing by their own characteristics, that they're truly existent, and so forth. Yeah. So all of this needs to be explored. What is this philosophical term actually talking about? But in the end, all of this is not actually the case. Things are not truly existent. They are not inherently existent. They do not exist from their own side. They do not exist by way of their own defining characteristics, and so forth. So that's the point. Ignorance is not just not understanding how things exist, but instead it is projecting something that things exist in a certain way. Because there is this kind of perception, out of this it is possible to do much more projections, like the projection of attachment and of anger and of pride and so forth. And then the whole samsaric universe comes about. Yeah, then because then out of this we do certain actions. In these actions we accumulate karma. This karma later on is then again activated by afflictions of the attachment type, and then we take another rebirth and so on. In this way we are continuously in this circle of taking rebirth again and again. So when we die, we are actually getting out of one of these bubbles created by karma. Yeah, we get out of these. We lose this kind of body that we have taken on. We lose a certain set of human emotions and human thoughts and perceiving ways of perceiving and so forth. Then we get out of that. But then because of attachment, we take another one. So the core for all of this is that we do not understand the reality. So we don't understand it, and instead we project another one and believe that. Just like with attachment, projecting qualities that are not there or exaggerating qualities, and then believing that. So the point will be, therefore, that the task for somebody who wants to get liberated, so that's somebody who is going into a very deep spiritual practice, so a yogi, in other words. The practice or the job for the yogi will be to find out how does this ignorance misperceive reality? What exactly is ignorance projecting on the world? What does it mean when the philosophical texts say that ignorance perceives things as truly existent, as inherently existent, as existing from its own side? What does this mean? What's the Buddha aiming at? What's the Buddha pointing at? So you need to find out how ignorance, what ignorance is projecting. So this is called the object of negation. You need to find that part in your perception, that part that is the ignorance, or what the ignorance is actually doing, what it is actually grasping at. So the point is this, we have actually a lot of misunderstandings. So with regard to the attachment, I already mentioned that we take things that are actually impure as being pure, or unclean things as being clean. An example would be that we might be quite proud of our body, or like our body a lot, and or being quite kind of, maybe there's some people who stand in front of the mirror and they're kind of quite busy with looking at themselves and being a little bit kind of in love with themselves and so forth. So the teachings on the disgustingness of the body are amazing. what the Buddha Dharma has to offer on teachings on the disgusting aspect of the body are quite. You have to be prepared for it. It's quite something. So that's an example of taking the unclean as clean. And then, of course, the topic is how do we do this with the bodies of others? So that's that thing. But then there is another thing, taking the impermanent as permanent. Yeah, so things that are decaying and disintegrating, we take them as not decaying, as if they are the same. So actually, we are aging all the time. We are aging while we are sitting here. We don't want to age. We don't want to get closer to death, but that's happening while we are sitting here. But maybe before I mentioned that, this was not on your mind. You were maybe thinking that we are all pretty much the same ever since we started this session. But actually, we are changing all the time. It is not that you're kind of living your life and then at one point somebody turns a switch, and then from that onwards is aging, and then another switch, and then there's death. We are all the time disintegrating. At one point, you look in the mirror and you find out, hey, I have a lot of white hair here on the side. Or you have all kind of wrinkles in the face and stuff like this. And you might get so upset with this that you start to dye your hair, or you do something about the wrinkles, creams, and I know it. But you have to find out about that. But there's no surprise to it. This was very clear from the beginning. You're an impermanent phenomenon. You're changing all the time. So instead of that, grasping for permanence, yeah, that people would not, that you yourself would not degenerate or would not change. So this you can do also before when we were talking about this car. When you buy this shiny car, it is really, really appearing as something that has these qualities, is standing there and is going to be your true and stable companion. But it's impermanent. It is dissolving as it's standing there. It will break. Definitely. It doesn't appear like that. So that's another thing. Yeah? So we have a lot of misconceptions about the things around us. And within that, we have a lot of appearances which have nothing to do with reality about things. So the question is, in all these kind of projections and all these kind of appearances that we have, which of these many misconceptions is that is grasping for an inherent existent self, or inherent existent way how objects and people are established? Yeah? What is the actual object of negation of the with regard to the ignorance that is the root of samsara? And so you will have you will find out that this whole topic that I'm describing here is something that is quite widespread in Indian philosophy. It is not so the whole attitude of saying that the suffering, and especially all the suffering that manifests as this cyclic rebirth, as samsara, that samsara has a cause, and that's not just our general affliction, but it has a cause in not understanding how we exist, how reality exists, how the things around us exist. This is a common thread amongst three religions out of India. I mean, yeah, a little bit imprecise, I say Hinduist traditions, Buddhist traditions, and the Jain tradition. All three of them. Yeah, so Hinduism has different types. It's actually an inaccurate term, but there's many things which are from the Indian tradition are neither Buddhist nor Chinese, not Jaina. So they are like there's teachings from a philosophy called Samkhya. Then there is the Vedantis and so forth. Yeah? So you have all kind of let's say Hinduist schools that have the same idea, that we are stuck in a rebirth cycle that has to do with karma, with afflictions. And if we want to get out of that, we have to break this mechanism. And the root of this mechanism is a misunderstanding about reality. So we need to find out what is this misunderstanding exactly, and then counteract it by an understanding how reality actually exists. Yeah? The ignorance will be dissolved by a wisdom. So I'm saying all of this because it's all about what is this ignorance exactly. And of course, there, the opinions are going in different directions. The Samkhya have one idea about how reality exists. The Vedantis have another idea. The Nyayyiks have another idea. The Jains have another idea. And then you come to Buddhism, fair enough. Also, they have another idea. But Buddhism has even 4 different philosophical schools. The Vaibhashikas, the Sautrantikas, the Chittamatrins, and the Madhyamikas. So that the subject is by no means easy. And what the Buddha had to say about this subject, what is actually that ignorance which is at the bottom of all of it, is so difficult that even within the Buddhist folder, they have different interpretations. Yeah? And there's no surprise here. We're talking about the root of the whole universe. We're talking about the root of all samsara. We're talking about the root of why we are in this state of constantly going from dissatisfactory experiences to other dissatisfactory experiences, that our happiness is very short-lived, and that when we die, we take the whole thing again by taking a rebirth. This whole mechanism of samsara, of karma, of afflictions, and so forth, we have experienced since beginningless times. That means times beyond imagination. To stop that will be complicated, and to find the actual basis, the bottom of the whole convoluted situation, will not be easy. There's no surprise that Buddhism came up with 4 different philosophical schools. They all base themselves on things that the Buddha said. So that's why they are studying in the big monasteries in Ganden, in Drepung, and in Sera for 26 years, in order to find out many things, find out about love, compassion, concentration, meditations, ethics, and so forth, but especially again and again about what these different schools have to say about this ignorance out of which all the other afflictions and karma and samsara comes out of. Yeah. So this this ignorance is not something that is very easy to understand. It is also not very easy to find in your experience. Yeah. This is because all of our experience is pervaded by this appearance of things existing from their own side. Yeah, so on the one hand, what we're looking for is right in front of our eyes. We're experiencing it all the time. On the other hand, everything is colored by it, so it doesn't really stick out. Like if you go into a room that is, full of chicken, and in the middle of it is a gigantic blue porcelain vase, and you are asked, is there something special in the room? You would say, yeah, there's a big porcelain vase in the middle. Sticks out. This is not the case with this appearance that is created by ignorance. The appearance, like everything, ignorance generates, let's say, with regard to the computer screen in front of you, ignorance generates a perception of this computer screen existing from its own side, truly, inherently, and so forth. But it is not doing it only with one object. With everything, it does that. Yeah? So with every car, every tree, the planets, the stars, everything. And with yourself, with your body, with all the different body parts, with your feelings. Ignorance makes your feelings appear to exist from their own side. Ignorance makes your thoughts appear like that. Your dreams, your wishes, and yourself, your person. Yeah? This is called the grasping for a self of person. Your ignorance, there's a certain ignorance that takes the person, yourself, as an object and perceives that self to be inherently existent, to be existent by its own divine characteristics from its own side, truly, and so forth. So we not only have, due to this ignorance, a projection on all things, but also on our body, our emotions, our mind, our dreams, and what have you, and on ourselves. So in other words, we have a misperception about ourselves and about the whole world, the outer world, the inner world. So that being the case, it's not going to be easy to actually identify what is this object of negation. So here's another aspect. We are talking here about Tibetan Buddhism. So Tibetan Buddhism is part of Mahayana Buddhism. So the aim of Tibetan Buddhism is not nirvana, but it is the nirvana for all beings. So in order to bring this about, you want to become a completely enlightened Buddha, because with the capacity of a Buddha, you will be able to help all sentient beings. So this attitude of wanting to become completely enlightened in order to help all sentient beings is called bodhicitta. Yeah? This has to do with things like having compassion for all sentient beings, having love for all sentient beings, exchanging yourself for others, seeing others as more important than yourself, many, many things. And then understanding that there's Buddhahood, that you have Buddha potential, that this kind of state of Buddha can be attained by practicing and so forth, and therefore finally aiming at this Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings with which you have exchanged yourself. So it's a very, very complex, very difficult practice. And on the other hand, the tool that you're going to use during the path to enlightenment is, again, this wisdom that realizes that the ignorance that is grasping for true existence is a complete fake thing, is a complete hallucinating mind. Yeah, so a wisdom that realizes that what this ignorance is grasping for does not exist whatsoever. There's an absence. In reality, there's an absence of that what ignorance is grasping for. Ignorance is generating an appearance of true existence, grasps for this true existence, believes in true existence, and that what it is grasping for, this true existence, does not exist at all. There's no such thing. It is hallucinated by ignorance. So wisdom understands ignorance is grasping for true existence, and wisdom understands there is no such thing. There's a mere absence of such true existence. Things are empty of true existence. So that state of things actually being empty of true existence, that's what we call emptiness. And what we are looking for is wisdom realizing emptiness, that absence. Because that is the direct antidote, exactly opposite to how ignorance perceives things. So if you generate this wisdom realizing emptiness, which is the absence of that what ignorance is grasping for, you have exactly the opposite, the antidote to that ignorance that is grasping in a completely hallucinating way at things. And if you have this direct antidote, then it will harm it, just like heat is harming cold. Yeah. So cold cannot abide if there is heat coming. It will diminish and it will be gone. And just in general, we are talking here about a lie and an understanding of truth. Yeah. If somebody, I think I made this example before. If you are you're looking for your phone or whatever, and you can't find it, and you think that Paul took it, and you're already kind of getting angry. Why did Paul take my phone? If he needs it, he could have asked me, but he took it without asking me. Probably wanted to steal it. He steals from me. Paul was stealing from me. Well, that's just unbelievable. You know, how can you do that? And you have this very, very unpleasant experience about Paul, and and you generate this idea of this guy wants to harm me or what. And you see Paul, and Paul says good morning, and you don't say anything back, and you just don't want to see the guy. And go back to your room, and there's your phone right there in the corner. Nobody stole anything. Paul is not a thief. It's right there. You just didn't see the thing. You might feel ashamed. But the thing is that the moment you understand that Paul didn't steal your phone because nobody stole your phone because it's right there, and that you had a projection, that you were under the impression of a lie, of a misunderstanding of reality, the moment you understand that, the lie is gone. Because the wisdom realizing that there was no thief is the direct antidote to your misperception of that there was a thief. Right? So if you have a misperception that has a certain way of apprehending things, and you have a wisdom that realizes that way of apprehending things has nothing to do with reality, there's an absence of that, it's not like that. This wisdom is destroying this ignorance. And that's exactly what we're talking about here with this wisdom realizing emptiness. It realizes the absence of that what the ignorance is grasping at. It is the direct antidote. It is that what does away with the lie. So why was I talking about this bodhicitta before? Yeah, that the motivation to become completely enlightened, which brings you to the Mahayana path. The teachings say this: with regard to the practice of emptiness, you need to understand what is the object of negation. So emptiness is a negation. Emptiness is an absence of something. Emptiness is saying like this and this is not there. There's an absence and emptiness. What is not there? The object of negation, the grasping for true existence. That's not there. When can people follow what I'm saying? Or am I too quick or something? Does this make sense what I'm saying? Yeah? Cool. Right? Sure. So in order to realize emptiness, you need to realize the absence of the object of negation. The object of negation is that what the ignorance is hallucinating, what it is generating an appearance of, and then believes that, grasps at that. That, what is grasped at by ignorance, does not exist at all. There's an absence of that. Yeah. So in order to meditate on emptiness, you need to understand the object that is grasped at by ignorance, but is an object of negation because it's not like that. Okay? So they say it is very difficult to identify the object of negation. When you have identified the object of negation, it is very easy to refute it. Yeah? So the wisdom realizing emptiness is refuting that object of negation. And that's actually quite easy once you have understood what needs to be refuted. When you have understood what exactly is this most subtle bedrock, foundational misunderstanding about reality, when you have understood what exactly ignorance is grasping at, then you can start to check this against reality and you can refute it rather easily. Okay? So with regard to wisdom, the problem is to identify what's exactly appearing in our mind and what are we grasping at. What is the object of negation? Once you have identified that, you can refute it more or less easily. More or less. I mean, from a certain point of view. Yeah? Anyway, so yeah. With bodhicitta, it's the other way around. Bodhicitta is very easily understood. It's very clear what it's talking about. But it's very difficult to practice. So with wisdom, it is difficult to understand what is this emptiness exactly about? What is absent? What object of negation is negated? What is it exactly? Because you have to get down to the bottom of it. Like, for example, you might find out, oh, I'm attached to things. I'm making a big thing out of stuff. But this is actually because I'm grasping at permanence. If I wouldn't grasp at permanence, then I would not be so attached to things. So I will more meditate on impermanence. If I do that, then I will be liberated from samsara because I will never be upset with anybody. I will not be attached to anything. I will not be proud. And then there will be no karma and I'm out of it. Yeah, so that makes sense to some extent, doesn't it? And definitely meditating on impermanence will lessen your afflictions. So the point is that the philosophical systems are saying it goes way further down than that. Way further down than that. Yeah, the actual source of even grasping for something being permanent is way further down. Yeah. So then they have different discussions in the different philosophical systems of Buddhism. How far it goes down, and for example, what the respective so these four schools are kind of arranged in a sequence, so that is said that the respective later school is a higher school, has a more refined view. Yeah, so maybe I mentioned this again. So we have first the Vaibhashikas. The Vaibhashikas are so called because they're following a certain kind of scripture which is called the Mahavibhasa, so the Vibhasa. So they're followers of the Vibhasa, of the Mahavibhasa, and the Vaibhashikas. Then you have the Sautrantikas. They, I think, called like this because they're following the sutra or some text that is called like this. So there's the Sautrantikas. Then you have the Chittamaugens. They're called the mind only. They're called the mind only. And this is not the highest school. They're talking about things being mind only. They're going so far. Maybe the ignorance is that we think there's stuff out there when actually everything is mind. They go very far. But they're not the highest school. It goes beyond that. So then there come the Madhyamikas. And within the Madhyamikas, you have the Svatantrikas and then finally the Prasangikas, the consequentialists. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, we are holding that the Prasangikas are the highest school. Right? Just to have a little overview of what's going on here, you know, but when we talk about object of negation and stuff, not easy at all. Because each of the schools would, of course, hold that there's an object of negation created by ignorance, grasped with the ignorance, which is the source of all of samsara, and needs to be destroyed by the wisdom understanding the absence of this, the emptiness. And they all would hold that they have understood what is the object of negation. As I said, the topic will be to identify what is the object of negation and then understand that this is not there, to negate it. So they all say they have actually understood. They must say that. They cannot say like, oh, we didn't understand the object of negation, but anyway, we're practicing generosity, that's okay. It's not okay. In Buddhism, you need to understand what is the source of samsara. It's a misunderstanding, and it is the subtlest misunderstanding. And so you need to find out what is this misunderstanding about? What is its object? How does it perceive this object? What kind of appearance is there? How does it deal with it, and so forth, yeah? So you need to understand that. So all of them say that they have a complete path to liberation or even to enlightenment. So therefore, they know what is the ignorance, or what is the wisdom liberating us from this ignorance. They all say, we have understood what is the object of negation. And so the respective higher school will have a more subtle presentation than the previous school about what is this object of negation. But the lower school will not accept that. The lower school will say to the highest, from our point of view, higher school, you people are refuting too much. What you are saying would mean that things don't exist at all. We, on the other hand, we refute something, but we also assert something. You people are, the next school is refuting something that needs to be asserted. I'm really afraid that I'm losing you right now. I try again. So I try from a different angle. So in Buddhism, we talk about the middle path, the way of the middle, yeah, the middling path. Yeah, I think that's what you call it, middling path, the path to the middle. So normally, from one point of view, this refers to that the Buddha was practicing a path in between complete immersing yourself into sensual pleasure. Yeah, he was in the palace. He was having access to all the education, all the literature, all the dance, all the music, all the food, all the ornaments, all the jewelry, everything, architecture, history, the whole thing. Sports, pools, elephants, chariots, all kind of cars. Maybe not cars. But anyway, so here it says everything what was to be had. And India is very good with regard to sensual pleasures as well. So he had that, and he left that. And then he went into the forest, and he was practicing as a yogi, and he did very strong concentration practices, and he found that this is not leading to what he was looking for. And then he did strong asceticism. Yeah. And so after, I think, 6 years of asceticism, he found out that while he was able to discipline his mind and his body enormously, and he was kind of, there's the statue of the Buddha like a skeleton. Have you seen that? The Buddha, that is where you see all the different veins and you see all the rib cage. Do you ever see this image? Anyone? No? Anyway, I'm just saying there is this part of the Buddha's path that he practiced incredible austerities. And so he found out that that also is not a path. It made the mind unclear, He could discipline body and mind like unimaginably, but it in the end did not help him to get out of samsara. So he said, what will help is an understanding, a wisdom, and for that you have to have a balance between sensual pleasure and asceticism, or let's say you have to have a balance between taking care of your body and, I say, disciplining your body. So he ate this famous sweet rice that was offered to him at that time, and he got a little bit stronger. And then he was in the middle between these two extremes of sense pleasure and extreme asceticism, and meditated on the tree of enlightenment and penetrated to understanding reality and became enlightened. So that's one way of talking about the path to the middle, or the middle way. Yeah, and you could say it has to do with behavior or with practice. But the other thing about the middle way is the philosophical one. The philosophical one is all concerned with how things exist and how they do not exist. And the philosopher will say they do not exist in this way. Yeah? They appear permanent, but they do not exist permanently. Yeah? And then it goes maybe one further and says they exist like this and this, but they don't exist like that. They appear like this, but they don't exist like that, and so forth. And so they negate more and more things that one normally might hold about objects. But at the same time, he does not want to go that far to say, so therefore, actually nothing exists. There is no world. All of this can be completely negated. We are just hallucinating. There is just no world. There's nothing. So this is called nihilism. Yeah. So nobody wants to go to that extreme of nihilism, that nothing exists whatsoever. On the other hand, all these Indian philosophical schools would say that because we are grasping at things as being too solid and too manifest and too permanent and so forth, this is why we have all these problems. So that side of grasping something as being too solid, too real, too actually there, too distinct from you, from your experience and so forth, yeah, that's called eternalism, grasping at eternalism. So the middle way is to find a description of the world and how things exist, how the mind exists, how the body exists, how the person exists, how you exist, that is in the middle between eternalism and nihilism, right? So in the end, you try to understand what is the actual way of existing of things, yeah? And this is in between, kind of stating, making them too solid in eternalism, or making them too non-existent, or to negate them in nihilism. So why would we end up with nihilism? Because we were talking about that the wisdom realizing emptiness is concerned with the object of negation. So this wisdom of emptiness has all to do with negating things. Yeah. So it says like, so this kind of thing appears, but that's not the reality. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. Ignorance is projecting things, it is generating a parallel universe, hallucinates things that are not there in this way. And this is especially talking about it hallucinates ways of existing that are impossible, actually. This is why they can be refuted. So that kind of way of existing that is hallucinated by ignorance and is believed in, grasped by ignorance, that's the object of negation. So you want to negate something, you want to say like, this is not the case. So if you go too far with this negation, you end up in nihilism. If you don't negate, you stay just like the world is, with all its war, with all its death, with all its aging, with all its greed, with all its attachment, all the relationships and the break of relationships and all this stuff, you know, all this karma, all this drama, and then death, and then do the same thing again, this time in the animal realm. Crazy. So you need to refute. You cannot just let the eternalism go on. So you need to find this middle way, right? So all of these Buddhist schools would hold that they have found the philosophical middle way. They have found the opposite of negation. They're not abiding in eternalism because they negate what is not the case, but they don't negate too much, so they don't end up in nihilism. Right? All of them would hold that. Of course, you need to find the middle way. This is the path. So all of them hold that they have a complete path. So the respective higher school will negate more than the school before, roughly speaking. The reaction of the previous school will be, oh, you have now fallen into nihilism. You have negated too much. But the higher school will say, no, it's rather that you are in eternalism because you have not negated enough. Okay? So again, what we want to find is the middle way. We need to negate all these things which are projected, which are not the case. If we do not negate them, we will hold things to be more solid or eternal or whatever than they actually are, and this will generate all of samsara and all the problems. So that's the eternalism. We don't want to be there. We want to negate that what has been added by ignorance, but we don't want to negate too much, because then we are negating things that actually exist and we end up in nihilism. That's also wrong. So we need to find this middle way. That's very clear from the outset. The different philosophical schools try to find this middle way, and they all hold that they have found it. Right? Yet, if you look at the description of these different schools, you will find out that the respective higher schools are negating more than the previous schools. Yeah? So a higher school will refute more than a lower school. Both of them hold that they have found the middle way. But that means that the higher school will say, no, to the previous school, you have not found the middle way because you have not refuted enough. We refute more and we found the middle way. So you are in eternalism, you lower school. And the lower school will say, no, that's not the case. We found the middle way. You have refuted too much, you higher school. You're therefore in nihilism. Right? This is the subject of wisdom. It's a little bit complicated. So it goes so far. It's amazing. What the final school, the Prasangikas, are saying, all the schools before are just screaming out, nihilism has refuted too much. What you are saying means nothing exists. It's amazing. So the way to deal with this is actually to go through the teachings of all these schools. So you start with the Vaibhashikas, and you will understand a presentation about reality that is already beyond what the Jains have to say and what Hinduism has to say. Yeah, so it's already quite something. For example, we say that the self is impermanent. Yeah, all Buddhist schools share that. The self is impermanent. This is a complete no-go for normal philosophers. The self is permanent. So Buddhism, all Buddhism, will say the self is impermanent. Then, when you have mastered this Vaibhashika school, you might go to the Sautrantika school and finally go to Yogacara, to the mind only. Mind only base will say things a little. The mind only also seems to be very complicated, and I haven't studied it enough to make final statements. But one of the things that the mind only would use is the example of a dream. So obviously Buddhism is checking what's going on in the mind, the mental states and so forth. Very much is focused on that. That's the main subject of study: mind, perception, reality, irreality created by the mind, and so forth. That even happiness and suffering, samsara and nirvana, will be states of mind to some extent. So what they are saying is, look at the mind. What is Yogacara, the mind only, is saying, look at the mind at the time of the dream, of sleeping and dreaming. So you're dreaming of horses, or as we said this so often today, of cars, let's say, you dream of cars. But that car is not really there, right? There is no car. You dream that you enter into a car and you drive that car. and that you break that car. But then somehow the car transforms into a different car and you drive it again and stuff. Yeah, so that's going on in dreams. So there is definitely things that you have that are appearing, that you are experiencing and so forth, but they're not really there. So why would you dream about these things in the first place? How does this work? And so they would say that there is a potential in the mind that is ripening in the dream into the object that you're experiencing and the experience. So that means that the object of your dream is not the cause of your dream, because the cause comes before the result. But here, the object of the dream and the dream are generated simultaneously. Yeah? And now the Chittamotters are saying, like in a dream, it is when you are awake. Also in your awake state, you are actually experiencing things because there's a potential ripening into the object and the mind being simultaneous. You're having experiences ripening out of this kind of imprints. These imprints, on the other hand, are in the mind because of previous experiences that left imprints. So the objects that you are experiencing in your wake state, just like in the dream state, are ripening out of this imprint in your mind. This object and the experience of that, just like in the dream. And that imprint has been placed there, has been created by a previous state of mind. So therefore, everything is mind. All is mind, mind only. This is a very rough way of saying it. They don't say everything is mind. But in the end, it comes down to mind. Everything is kind of created by mind, if you like, yeah? Something like that. Yeah? So they go very, very far, very far. Make things very, very subjective. Things are ripening in your continuum. What's happening in other continua to be seen. Yeah? So that's how far this school goes, and it's by far not the last school. The other schools, so there's two types of Madhyamika. The last school is Madhyamika, but then there's the Svatantikas, and then there's the Prasangikas, and they go very, very far. But what they all agree on is that if you look for the object and you analyze it, what is it actually? You will find something. It will somehow be there. Not like you thought before, but you will find something. For example, when you look for the self and you try to find the self, what you will find is a mental consciousness. And they say we need to find something, because if there is nothing, then how can we say there is such a self or such a phenomenon? And if there's nothing from the side of the object, how could it possibly function? So something needs to be there on the side of the object. We need to refute a lot, but something needs to be on the side of the object. Some kind of characteristic, some core, something from the side of the object. Then there's a lot of adding, and the mind is involved. There's a lot of labeling and so forth there, but there's something from the side of the object. And the last school says there's nothing from the side of the object. And still, everything functions. There's nothing from the side of the object. When you look for the object, you do not find anything on the side of the object. When you look for the self, what is it really? Yeah, this is called an ultimate analysis. What is it actually? Then you will not find something that is that person, but you will find an absence. You will not find it. The closer you go, you will not find it. Instead, it will disappear. And you will have an absence of that very phenomenon that you were looking for. So you're looking for the self, and what you find is an absence. and emptiness. You find the emptiness of the self. But that's not what you were looking for. You were not looking for the emptiness of the self. You were looking for the self. And that self, in this analysis, according to the higher school, is not findable. Instead, you find emptiness as the ultimate truth. But if you have somebody who's crying and needs your support right now, right here, you give that support. And in that, you don't do ultimate analysis. And then the other person is findable and you are findable, and somebody is in tears and you act with compassion and you support and so forth. And so it's functioning, and the other person will feel comfort and will be supported and will see some way to continue with his life and so forth. You will be able to help. But if you would do an ultimate analysis, that person cannot be found. You trying to help cannot be found. The tears cannot be found. The emotions of the other person cannot be found. The suffering of the other person cannot be found. The samsara cannot be found. The liberation cannot be found. The Buddha cannot be found. The teaching cannot be found. Ultimately, there's nothing from the side of the object, from any kind of object, be it teachings, being liberated beings, beings in samsara and so forth. That, in a nutshell, is what the highest school is saying. But if you don't do ultimate analysis, everything functions. No problem. So all the schools before that are screaming unisono, nihilism. You have refuted too much. Of course, it's the high school. Everybody else will say they refuted too much. I don't know. I think I thought to just put this in front of you. I'm not expect. I also have to say this is what they are studying in the monasteries and what we did a little bit here in Milan as well. To get some, how do things actually exist, and together with that, how do they appear to our mind? Yeah, and so because this is such an advanced topic, and in order to get this clear, they study for 26 years. That's why I was going to the afflictions to check out here how the afflictions generate realities, how we can deal with these afflictions by refuting these realities. So when the affliction is generating a purity where there's something impure, or something that has only good qualities, when there is no thing that has only good qualities in our universe, yeah, then we can destroy that projection by applying a wisdom or a meditation that is meditating on the reality of the thing, counteracts that. Yeah? So in the same way, ignorance, the root of samsara, is functioning in a similar way. And so therefore, because being the root of samsara, we need to understand in great detail what is that about. And for this, we do studies. Once we have studied, then we reflect on that, or we go into retreats. And then when you get some clarity about that, then finally you will do meditation on that, what you have established. You have understood actually what is this object of refutation. You have actually established it. You have established how you can refute that. And now you meditate on that. And if you do that, then at one point you get a realization of emptiness. It's going to be first a conceptual realization of emptiness. And by improving that more and more through a long time, you will finally even get so far that you have a direct realization of emptiness. Yeah? Direct means that there is no thought process involved. It is as direct as when we see blue with our eyes, for example. In the same way, a mental consciousness can directly realize emptiness. And that direct realization of emptiness becomes the true path. That's the antidote. That direct realization is exactly opposite to the ignorance, and is going to chip away on the ignorance in every session. This is the true path leading to true cessation. If you have destroyed the ignorance in this way with this true path, then it's just absent. It is destroyed. There's a cessation of this kind of ignorance. If there is no such ignorance, none of the other afflictions can do their projection anymore, because the very basis is gone. Karma will not be accumulated. Karma will not be activated. And there is nobody perceiving himself in a fantasized way that he or she feels like she needs to have another life. She needs to have this kind of activation of another samsaric bubble. Because you understand who you are. You understand your own middle way. You have negated everything that you have added for so many eons, but you have not ended up in nihilism. Somebody told me that Lama Zopa Rinpoche one time was talking about emptiness, and he was talking about how we exist and so forth, and this whole topic. And so at one point, he simply started to say this. He said, you exist, but you almost don't exist. But you exist. But you almost don't exist. But you exist. But you almost don't exist. But you exist. So this is exactly going back and forth between negating and affirming, and always going back to the other thing to make sure that you are in the middle and you don't negate too much. You almost don't exist. Doesn't mean you don't exist, but you almost don't exist, but you exist. But then when you say, oh, that's cool, I exist, so I can just go on like before, but you almost don't exist, but you exist. Because if you look for yourself, you cannot find anything, just an absence. It's just the emptiness of yourself. But if you don't look for that, you can function. You can become completely enlightened. But if you look for this completely enlightened being, you cannot find anything. It's just an absence, empty of inner existence. But if you don't look for this enlightened being is radiating into the 10 directions with love and compassion, is teaching the Dharma wherever it's possible. Completely functioning. All right. So it's good to know a little bit about what these Four Noble Truths are saying. The whole headline here was a wisdom. So what is this wisdom actually about? But it is always necessary to find a way to bring this into your own life. And this is why I was talking about the afflictions. So all this ignorance that is creating all of this samsaric bubble shares this strong similarity to our afflictions that are creating bubbles about objects, about ourselves, about relationships, about the country, I don't know what stuff. Yeah. So in the same way that we need to counteract the basic ignorance, which will take a long time for us to understand what this is, but once we have understood this, we have access to an incredible tool to really alternate all our future out of samsara into peace and even into complete enlightenment. But for the time being, to take into your daily life that you counteract your attachments, that you counteract your pride, that you counteract your fear, that you counteract your jealousy and so forth by saying, look, what's going on? I am unhappy right now. I'm shaking inside. I'm somehow hyper. I have no peace and no calm, and I'm completely kind of distracted and stuff like that. What's going on? I'm not well. It's probably an affliction. So what am I doing right now? What is it? What's going on exactly? Oh, I'm actually upset about how this person over there behaves. So if what the person does over there is upsetting me so that I'm myself getting through suffering and disturbance and so forth, then probably what's going on right now is that an affliction is projecting on this person and is creating a parallel universe which has nothing to do with reality, and I'm going to pop the balloon right now and come to the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is that indeed this person is misbehaving, but this doesn't take away that this person also has good qualities and that one can talk to this person. This person is impermanent. This person is not always like that, and right now is misbehaving. And now that I have come back to reality, I can now judge what's the best way to deal with that. But before, I was upset, I was shaking, I was angry, I was making a story. I was messing myself up. I was not working on my project to be happy and not to suffer. Yeah. So that's the level in daily life, maybe, where you can bring this in. as our afflictions are really kind of almost overwhelming, and they're almost there all the time. Yeah, the moment we see a beautiful object, immediately an attachment and the story builds up. When something is not according to our wishes, and a strong dislike, and maybe even an anger or a wish to get rid of it, or without considering it, and so forth, all this comes up. One could almost say that anything that we perceive does not exist in the way that we perceive it right now. We're hallucinating all the time. So from the point of view of ignorance, that's true anyway. Yeah, we're constantly dealing with things that are inherently existent, while this is impossible. Nothing can exist inherently. And we constantly have this appearance. But that's a very subtle level. It's a very important level, but we are not there. We should do everything to get to this level, so study as much as possible and try to deal with the topic as much as possible. But where we are right now is that we can deal with our attachment by saying, if I'm stirred up by attachment, then probably 100% sure I'm making a story right now, and I am not relating to what is actually there, but to my projections. And I can pop the balloon. I'm empowered. I have the power to do this right here, right now. All right? I have just so no clue what time it is. Okay. I guess that was it for today, unless you have some questions. No. Tharchin, why are you shaking your radiant soul? Questions. Okay.
Well, I have about 100 questions.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, you gave me the most beautiful headache today, so thank you. And I don't mean it ironically, I really do. It was a great thing to hear you talk. My question is about the experience of realizing emptiness, and not really how it's like, but if you think about phenomena in Buddhist philosophy, like basically there isn't one thing that you can define in and of itself, because basically how we conceptualize things, we attribute different group qualities to objects, like you said. So basically we can define like a table being this object with 4 legs. That is how we define a table. But another person I might tell this person, tell of this object to another person, and he might understand that, okay, this is like this small thing that you put on pizzas in order not to stick the box to the actual cheese. So what I'm trying to say is that if the nature of reality is this thing that you can't really define anything, the only way you can define things is by the use of other objects. And it means that basically, even if you talk about emptiness, part of this realization must come from experience. So it's basically, you can't construct this whole library of ideas and concepts in order to understand emptiness. You also have to have like a direct experiential ingredient to it. So you talked about like, okay, on the first level, it's basically intellectual, where, okay, you start to understand it through wisdom. And eventually you get to a point where you also can experience it or have a direct grasp of it. So my question is that basically, is this like experiential experience always preceded by an intellectual understanding, or basically, is it possible for someone, I don't know, maybe who didn't even study Buddhism, or it's didn't come in contact with Dharma, but maybe just experienced it.
Yeah, I mean, I would hold that this is not possible. You cannot get a grasp of reality kind of by accident or by like you could say this experience of reality, of emptiness, is itself is an experience. It's a realization of emptiness. It is a mind, right? So minds are impermanent phenomena. They have causes. Yeah. So let's say like in a more everyday connection, if you see blue, you need first of all a blue. Without a blue, you cannot see blue. Then you need to have the apparatus of the eyes and so forth there. So traditionally, to say the eye sense power in place. And then on that together with in general there being mind, can generate a mind that apprehends blue, which is a specific type of mind. Yeah? It can only apprehend colors and shapes. You cannot hear sounds. It cannot think. It can only apprehend that. So it has all these causes. So in the same way, if you are learning a language, yeah, to finally be able, again, this is a mind that brings about the usage of the different parts of the body to express certain kind of grammar and words and so forth. Yeah. So in order to get there to a fluent mind, you have to train in that kind of language. In order to train this language correctly, you have to learn this language. So there's all these different mind effort before that leads to you finally being so versatile in this language that the mind can easily kind of produce all of that. So this is true for all minds. All minds have causes. And so also this mind of realizing emptiness has to have its causes, and have to be causes that are similar to it. Yeah. So it is not by thinking about compassion that at one point you're so compassionate that all of a sudden you realize emptiness. So the cause for such a powerful wisdom that is having a direct realization is a less powerful realization, which is conceptual but almost direct. And the cause for this conceptual one that is conceptual but almost direct is a coarser conceptual one, and so forth, until the point where you first time had a conceptual realization. And before that, you would have what is called a correct assumption with regard to emptiness. So this means you would have a certain kind of understanding of it, but it has not been integrated in you so much that you actually have a realization of emptiness. So a realization is something that you will not lose afterwards. Once you have realized something, you have owned it, you have penetrated it so strongly that nobody, however charismatic, however powerful, however praised by others, however famous this person is, he cannot dissuade you from that. Yeah? So when you see that the color in front of you is blue, nobody can dissuade you from that. Nobody can make you think that actually it is, I don't know, yellow. You're very clear, it's blue. So in the same way, if you have a realization in a thought process where you have really penetrated the reason and how this pervades to the object and so forth, and you get to the realization, nobody can dissuade you from that. But in order to get to that deep understanding of the reasoning and so forth, you will have a previous moment where you're correct. And even your reason is correct, but it hasn't gotten into you so strongly. This is called a correct assumption. There's different types of correct assumptions. There's correct assumptions of this type that have the right reason. But then there's other correct assumptions where you say, like, it's like that because my guru said so. So out of belief. This doesn't have the correct reason, but still you are having the correct assumption. You come to the correct outcome. There's even correct assumptions where you say it is like this because, and then you give a reason which is actually contradictory. It has nothing to do with it. So there's many different types of correct assumption. And there's a final form of correct assumption on the basis of which you can get realization. So that's the cause for the realization. And then the cause for these correct assumptions are these different previous moments. And before that, You didn't even have a correct assumption. Before that, you had a doubt. You had a doubt, maybe it's like that, maybe it's like that. Maybe things are inherently existent, maybe they're empty of inherently existent. I don't know. But this emptiness thing sounds pretty good. So you have a so-called doubt towards the fact. Then you can have a doubt that says like things are either inherently existent, which would mean that and that, or they're empty, which would mean that and that. But I don't know really. And then you can have a doubt which is saying like things are either empty or they're inherently existent. They need to be inherently existent. I'm pretty sure about this, but I have a doubt. And the starting of that is where we are, is a risk conception that single-pointedly says things are inherently existent. Things are over there. They have a core. I'm here. There's no doubt about it. That I'm here so much that if you look for me, you will find me somehow. If I would look for I will find me. I'm somehow here. We have no doubt about that. Yeah. So to do it the other way around, we are right now in this form of wrong consciousness, which is this 100% is ignorance. Yeah? This wrong consciousness that thinks that feels or things on a certain level, not verbally spelled out. Of course, who's walking the street saying like, oh, I think this over there is inherently existent, or this one is truly existent. Those are all technical terms, but there is an actual experience of that. And this experience has no doubt about these things. Yeah? The things appear to be over there, to have a core, to be exist from their own side. And there's no doubt about this in us. So by doing philosophy, we might start to doubt that. We bring up this topic and then there's some doubt coming, but still we are leaning towards that they are inherently existent. By doing more exposure to philosophy, we come to a doubt that is equally to both sides. Either they're inherently existent or they're not inherently existent, they're empty of that. I don't know. Then we get further and we get a doubt that says like, I still can't decide, but probably they're empty. And then later on, you get a correct assumption, and maybe you make a mistake in your reasoning, but you come so far that you actually feel like, yes, I don't doubt that. I don't have a two-party mind. I think things are empty. They are not inherently existent. And then this goes through a sequence, and you get so far that you actually have the correct reasonings, and it's pretty established. But it hasn't become a realization yet. If somebody comes who is really charismatic and is really radiating and is famous and stuff like this, you might fall for that presentation of this other teacher, let's say a Hindu teacher or a Jain teacher that tells you something completely different, because your reasoning has not been penetrating you. But if you do the next step, you get a realization, a conceptual realization, an inferential realization based on reasons, based on having so-called mental images. You will have a mental image of emptiness, but within that you will realize emptiness. And then this can be refined further and further. You will get more merits, you will get more generosity, more ethics, more patience, and so forth there. You will have more concentrations, and with a more concentrated mind, you go on this emptiness, you get further and further. This has many steps. Maybe I talk about this next time. If there's a next time, we have to talk about it. The so-called 5 paths leading to liberation, yeah, or to enlightenment, dependent on the context. So then you refine this more and more, and yeah, this mental image. I can't go into detail. I'm just saying some stuff here. Yeah? So in a conceptual mind, you deal with the representation of the object. Actually, you think about it. It's not the object itself that you're seeing. You have a so-called representation, a so-called mental image. So if you realize emptiness conceptually is a thought, you're not seeing emptiness directly. You have a representation of emptiness, a mental image. That mental image in your thought realization is then going to get changed. It's going to be replaced by more and more subtle and more accurate mental representations, until finally there's a final meditation where you break through. And there is no mental image anymore, no representation. You see emptiness, a direct realization of emptiness. That before was already a realization. Nobody could dissuade you from that. You were completely correct, and it was integrated, but it was conceptual. And you get to that so-called path of seeing, and then there you have this direct realization of emptiness, and then that needs to be powered up more and more and more by more merits, by more love and compassion, by more generosity. Path of seeing is where the bodhisattva, for example, would give away his body, very huge levels of generosity, yeah, and stuff, and things will start to happen. You will start to have emanation bodies, and you will do things with that. And in the middle of this is this direct realization of emptiness becomes more and more powerful, until finally it is abandoning all the afflictions, and then it will start to destroy the obstacles to omniscience. And when it has done that, there's a final meditation emptiness out of which you will never rise again, because within that you become a Buddha who sees emptiness all the time and all phenomena at the same time. So that, in a nutshell, is how this is developed. So when you look at that sequence, it's very unlikely that somebody is just going to see it by accident, kind of thing, you know. Oh.
Yes, I asked that because some schools of Buddhism talk about sudden enlightenment, and I thought that maybe the two concepts are connected.
Yeah, so that's of course the point. What is sudden enlightenment? Don't know. I mean, our school does definitely not think about that. Like there was a famous debate in debate between a Chinese master and a master from the master Kamala Shila from Nalanda, and it was if I'm not wrong, exactly about this point. Kamala Shila out of India, out of the Nalanda monastery in India, was holding how I call this a gradual approach, and the Chinese master was holding a sudden enlightenment. And well, as it happens, it is said that the Chinese master lost this debate. Anyway, so anyway, that's something to look at maybe, but it's definitely out of my scope, because the school that I'm studying here is not holding sudden enlightenment. Yeah, yeah, yes. Even when you talk about things like Mahamudra, or you talk about things like enlightenment, highest yoga tantra, where you become enlightened within one life and stuff like this. Yeah, so yeah, like in the end, we will all become enlightened in one instant. Everybody becomes enlightened in one life. Everybody becomes enlightened in one day. Everybody becomes enlightened in one instant. So when we become a bodhisattva on the 10th bhumi, and we are at the end of the 10th bhumi, we go to the final meditation, we're going to be enlightened in one instant in that life. So big deal, you know. But the thing is, like, this kind of power where you have a mind that can, in that very life and in this very instant, become enlightened, has itself causes. Yeah. So I'm pretty confident saying that none of us here will become enlightened in this life. None of us will have a direct realization of emptiness in this life. None of us will have a sudden enlightenment. And also, when I see these other traditions, you know, I tell you what, I don't know. I mean, it's a mystery for me. So I would have to talk with somebody from this other tradition to explore a little bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if the person from this other tradition would have problems to express him or herself, because they are not a study tradition. They are not into making precise statements. They are more into concentration and meditation and observing what's going on in the body and so forth. They don't have the apparatus to express themselves. Yeah. And the other thing is also this is a personal thing. Yeah. So for me personally, it's like this. I think there's a lot of people who don't want to do all the effort. It's very, very tedious and difficult to do all these studies. It's a huge thing, and one simply wishes to have a quicker path, something that is bypassing all of that and is kind of easily available and right here, right now. Okay, fine. I can understand that somebody simply wants to make experiences and learn out of experiences. But what I got from all these studies over the last years, and we are in the final days of our master program, we are about to finish our master program, so it's really the last years of study. What I got is the spiritual realm is huge. There's oceans of different experiences to be gotten out there. And many of them will be outstanding and very special, and you will never have had something like that. Types of bliss, types of pacification of the mind, types of concentration, maybe apparitions, maybe visions, maybe all kind of extrasensory capacities like hearing things that are far away, and I don't know what stuff. There's a lot going on outside our little bubble here on this planet of working, 9 to 7 and paying taxes and being afraid of a coronavirus. Outside of this kind of little thing, there's oceans of things going on. So if you go for experiences, how are you going to validate your experiences? There's oceans of things out there. So you make an exceptional meditation experience, and then you come out of that and you conceptualize it. You say, oh, that was a sudden enlightenment. How would you know? You just had an experience and it was extraordinary. So you would need a master to validate that. Yeah? So who's going to validate the master? Anyway, there's a lot going on in the mind. The potentials of the mind are unbelievable. If you study about the Mahayana path, what the bodhisattvas are going through, once they have this direct realization of emptiness on the so-called 10 bodhisattva grounds, nearing enlightenment over a long time. And especially if you look at tantric practices, what tantra, different from all the misconceptions about tantra that exist and are horrible, but what tantra actually is presenting as a practice, unbelievable, unbelievable. What kind of states are described here? Unbelievable. So all of that is out there, or rather, it's all in here. So any of this kind of experience comes up, and then what? What are you going to do with the experience? You need to validate it. You need to put it into a context, or you don't have a context. You didn't study. You don't know about all kinds of different experiences. You made an experience. And then, of course, you say, well, I guess that was it. There was a sudden enlightenment or something. There's a story which I really like. At one point, a student of Lama Yeshe came to Lama Yeshe and said to Lama Yeshe, okay, Lama, I'm enlightened now. What's next? Yeah, so actually, I find this super funny, and I just want to kind of laugh my head off when I hear this. But the reaction of Lama Yeshe was so cool. He was saying, okay, tell me, what kind of experience did you have? Yeah, so it's exactly that. This guy made some, for in his world, extraordinary experience. Maybe an incredible level of peace or quiet or maybe joy, I don't know, whatever. And he thought he's now enlightened. And he was not stupid, he was practicing, he wanted to be enlightened. So that's already rare on this planet. And the Lama was reacting to it like, okay, what's happening is that you had an experience, let's evaluate it. Yeah. So that's what comes to my mind with regard to sudden enlightenment. Yeah. And that's all I have to say, actually.
We still got a question on the chat. Okay.
What was that?
We still got a question.
Uh-huh.
And I write a question on the chat. Why, when we say merely labeled, we are referring only to merely labeling on mind consciousness? This is one. The meaning of something should be on this at the side of the object too. That is asserted by Prasanika Madhyamika school. Is referring to the existence of the elements water, earth, fire, wind, and the way our mind is reacting to that. It's a long one.
Yeah, so with regard to the first one, why when we say merely labeled, we are referring only to merely labeling on mind consciousness. So I actually did not use these terms today, just to say that. But this is one way how you talk about, like on the one hand, we say like things do not exist from their own side. So then how do they exist? And so one way to say this is they exist as being merely labeled by mind. But there's a great many ways of expressing this. There's a great many phrases that are used here. So, for example, some people say things are empty of inner existence and they exist as mere names. Or they say they exist by being labeled a mere name. Or they exist by way of being labeled a convention, and Geshe lately said even like being labeled a convention outwards and stuff like this. Yeah, so that a lot of this kind of terms, and they need to be checked what this actually means. The nutshell must be that on the side of the object, when you look for it with ultimate analysis, you really try to find the object. Nothing can be found. That's on the highest level, the meaning of being merely labeled by mind. Yeah, so that's the meaning of it. Okay? Things appear to have a core. Things appear to be really there, but if you and that means they appear like when you look for them, you will get it clearer and clearer. The closer you go to the object, because they're really there, you will come closer to the core and you will actually find the object. The opposite is the case. If you do this kind of analysis where you look for what it really is, it disappears and there's an absence. So because when you look for it, there is an absence, then the way it appears to ignorance that there is something to be found is not the case. So the object of negation is that there is something to be found. So therefore, when you look for that, what is to be found, you don't find it, there's an emptiness. So the emptiness is the ultimate truth. So that's what it's actually in the end coming down to. Then when we say it is merely labeled by mind, this really needs to be explored. Because the first thing, I mean, of course, to be very clear, this phrase is used very often. But here's some questions that you would need to use in order to check out what this actually means. Everything is merely labeled by mind. By whose mind? Which mind are we talking about? For example, the planet Earth is merely labeled by mind. Whose mind? Is it labeled by your mind? So if it exists only by being merely labeled by mind, and this mind is your mind, then obviously it would not exist before you exist, because it is merely labeled by your mind. So there was no planet Earth before you were born on the planet Earth. That's not right. That's not the case. So when we say things are merely labeled by mind, the question is by what mind? What are we talking about? But what the meaning is in the end is that if you look for the object, it cannot be found. If you look for the planet Earth, you will not find the planet Earth. Instead, there will be an absence, and that's the emptiness of it. Yeah. So that's the difficulty with this kind of expressions. They are merely labeled by mind and so on. The question is by what mind? But then, of course, you can play with that. Maybe next time I can come back to this, because now it's really late actually. Another thing is that sometimes it says things are mere names. That's not true anyway. It's a phrase that is not accurate, but is used to express again simply that things are not existing from their own side. They are not inherently existent, not truly existent, and so forth. And the phrase is things are mere names. Names are sound. That's what names are. So when I say things are mere names, then let's go back to the infamous car, then cars are names, and names are sound. So cars are sound. Really? I don't think so. Or let's say blue. Blue is a color. A color is not sound. You can understand this by that not the ear consciousness is understanding color, but the eye consciousness. Sound is understood by the ear consciousness and not by the eye. So blue is mere, if phenomena are merely a name, then blue would be merely a name. Names are sound. That means that blue can be heard by the eye consciousness and cannot see, can be heard by the ear consciousness and cannot see by the eye consciousness. That's not the case. Things are not names. So that phrase that things are names or merely names is to be explored. What is the meaning of that? Yeah? Just like when I said, they're merely labeled by mind. What does this actually mean? What mind? And so forth. Yeah? So there's all these terms that you need to check. But there's interesting, anyway. Yeah. The point is that things seem to have to have a core. Yeah. So especially we ourselves, we feel like we have a core. And that we are certain things. And that therefore we need to act in certain ways, and that we have certain needs and stuff like this. So if this is all not the case, that we are not certain things, but this is just kind of a contextual thing, that we are that, then many of our needs are no longer there, actually. There is no such need. We don't need to fulfill this need. We're free by nature. Yeah, anyway, so maybe I can go into this a little bit more next time, we will see. And the other thing, the meaning of something should be on the side of the object too, that is asserted by Prasangika Madhyamika school, is referring to the existence of the elements and so forth. So the Prasangika Madhyamika school is exactly, there is nothing on the side of the object. But it's saying this in the context of emptiness, of ultimate analysis. So in ultimate analysis, when you look for the object, you will not find anything, also not elements or water, earth, fire, and so forth, and something you react to, not in ultimate analysis. Yeah. Then on the other hand, like our body, for example, is made of these elements like water, earth, wind, and fire. So if you don't do an ultimate analysis and just look like what are the different compositional factors or the different components of the body, then you can find things like wind, earth, wind, or rather bones and organs and stuff like that. Yeah. So that's of course there, and also the Prasangikas would say that there's a basis of labeling, and then onto this there is a labeling done and so forth. Yeah. So they would hold all of this, but not in ultimate analysis. In ultimate analysis, there's no basis of labeling. Because if you look for the basis of labeling with ultimate analysis, you only find the absence of the basis of labeling. You find an emptiness. This goes so far that if you then look for this emptiness, you also don't find that emptiness, but the emptiness of that emptiness. Okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ah, Anna Maria Plezouf.
Yes, it's me. I'm present. Sorry, I don't know why the camera is not. Ah, now it's working. Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, thank you.
Hello. All right, so that's maybe all I have to offer for today. Again, I'm very sorry for last time. I was shocked about myself. You know? Later in the evening, I found out, man, there was something there, wasn't it? So anyway, it happened once in a year, I think, or something. That's okay. It's okay, you know. Right, I think we have another last session or something in this next time, isn't it? Yeah?
Yes, yes. Or if you still have time for us, I don't know.
Yeah. The thing is that we are finishing the MP now, and so I don't know how the last days are looking like, and then we have some 10 days to prepare